Primarchs, probably the greatest thing that has ever happened to Warhammer. Now, we always talk how Primarchs overcome any foe, they defeat any enemy. Well, in today's video, we're going to turn that around. We're going to talk about the Primarchs' greatest failures. Failures that has cost the Imperium everything. So let's jump in and let's get waffling. Now, before we start to get ahead of ourselves, I think it's best to start with one of the biggest Primarch failures, and that is with FERRUS MAGNUS. He was one of the greatest generals that led the Imperial forces throughout the Great Crusade. He led his troops, his sons, his legion into battle after battle with his iron will and brutal tactics. But the lust for revenge cost FERRUS MAGNUS not only his life, but basically the life of his legion as well. Now, the downfall of FERRUS basically came at the hands of his most beloved brother, Fulgrim. Now, these two Primarchs shared a kindred from each other, unlike any other of the Primarchs. They literally forged each other's weapons. Now, when Horus declared that he would be going against the Emperor and starting his own empire, Fulgrim was one of the Primarchs that joined him. Now, Fulgrim, because he shared a close bond with FERRUS, went to him to try and convince him to join Horus's cause. Now, FERRUS said no. Fulgrim and FERRUS had a little bit of a scrap on FERRUS's ship. Fulgrim more or less came out the victor, and he left FERRUS for dead. FERRUS then was consumed by revenge and seeking out Fulgrim on the battlefield. With the betrayal of Horus fully known to the Imperium, the Emperor and the loyalist Space Marine legions were sent to Isstvan V, where they would confront Horus, Fulgrim, and all their followers. And of course, FERRUS MAGNUS was part of this force sent there to seek retribution. FERRUS basically led the vanguard, but unbeknownst to him and some of the other loyalist legions taking part in this campaign, most of the Space Marine legions were actually under the banner of Horus. FERRUS led the vanguard into the heart of the traitor forces, where he met his brother Fulgrim atop a little mountain in front of everyone, and they dueled. At this time, the traitorous forces revealed themselves, Night Lords, Salamanders, they were all clashing with each other. Raven Guard were starting to be obliterated, the Iron Warriors started to nuke everyone, and FERRUS was basically cut off with a small detachment of his iron hands. There, on that peak, Fulgrim beheaded FERRUS with his demon sword, and the iron hands were basically wiped out. All because FERRUS got ahead of himself, charged into the enemy lines, consumed by his revenge, and overconfident that the Imperial forces would bring retribution on the enemy forces. Now, the reason why I think this is one of the biggest failures is not because of the legions being wiped out on Isstvan, is because FERRUS MAGNUS himself dying. Up to this point, everyone thought that Primarchs were unkillable, but once FERRUS died, it sent a whole different message throughout the galaxy, throughout the Imperium, throughout the legions itself. Times were changing, and FERRUS was the first Primarch to die. Next up is everyone's favorite Psyker Primarch. I'm talking about Magnus the Red. Magnus thought he knew the answers, but he didn't even know the page he was reading from. Magnus basically destroyed the Imperium from within because of his hubris, because he thought he knew better. I'm talking about when he wanted to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal. The story behind this is that the Emperor basically outlawed any type of Psykers in the galaxy. That included the Thousand Sons, who are known for their psychic abilities. Now, when Horus fell on the moon of Davin and he was slowly being corrupted to the powers of chaos, Magnus saw him in a vision. He tried to convince Horus of the Chaos forces, slowly betraying him against the Emperor. Horus didn't listen to the words of Magnus, so Magnus decided to do the next best thing, and that was to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal. Now, to do this, he psychically projected himself across the galaxy because he was on his world of Prospero and he needed to get the message to Terra as soon as possible. The problem with this is he put so much energy with himself and his psychos projecting himself when he landed on Terra in his psychic form, he broke the seals around the Golden Throne. These seals were put in place by the Emperor to protect the Golden Throne from the powers of chaos. With the seals broken around the Golden Throne, chaos could enter the webway and basically breach Terra itself. To stop this, the Emperor sat on the Golden Throne, and throughout the entirety of the Horus Heresy, he basically fought a secret war in the webway against the forces of chaos. Now, of course, if he didn't have to sit on the Golden Throne and the seals weren't in place, the Emperor could have took to the field and easily taken out Horus. Horus at this time, at the beginning of the Horus Heresy, wasn't infused by the powers of chaos, so that matchup would have been nothing for him. But of course, because of Magnus and what he did, he basically had to sit on the sidelines and watch Horus gather all this power that eventually led to Terra itself, and here we are right now at the Siege of Terra. The fallout from this, which we don't really know at this point because lore is constantly changing, led to, of course, the events of Warhammer 40,000, where there is now eternal war and the Emperor is sat immobile for all eternity on the Golden Throne. And next up is everyone's favourite Wolf King, and that is Leman Russ. Leman Russ was known as the Emperor's executioner. Some say that he was sent to purge the 2nd and the 11th Legions. That was the rumour at the time. So who better to face Horus and bring him down? And that is exactly what he did. Leman Russ went out in the galaxy to seek Horus and fight him in a duel, and Leman Russ actually had the chance of killing Horus, but he never took it. He actually stopped at the last second. He could have ended everything with one swing from his spear. Now, Leman Russ wielded a spear that was given to him by the Emperor. The twin of this spear is actually wielded by Constantine Valdor himself. Now, Leman Russ's spear allows the person who it strikes to see their true self, and this is what happened with his duel with Horus. When he struck Horus in combat, the old Horus appeared. For a split second, he looked upon himself like, what have I become? Blinded by this, Leman Russ did not take the final strike. And then the new Horus, the consumed by hatred Horus, returned and then beat Leman Russ all over the vengeful spirit. Leman Russ, licking his wounds, retreated with his Space Wolves, and he failed to kill Horus. But for that split second, he had the chance to end him. He had the chance to end the Horus Heresy. For me, that is one of the biggest failures, because if he killed Horus, the Emperor wouldn't have gone and fought Horus and then ended up immobile on the Golden Throne. Maybe the Golden Throne itself could have been fixed, the Imperium could have been restored, we could have been living in the greatest time possible, but we're not, and it's all down to Leman Russ. Now, from the wolf to the lion, because Lionel Johnson, for being the master that he was during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, made some absolute tactical blunders during this time. Tactical blunders that cost the Imperium dearly. Tactical blunders that today are still costing the Imperial dearly in the Warhammer 40,000 lore. So we're going to start with the big one, and that is Lionel Johnson gave the siege guns to Perturabo. The siege guns that Perturabo then used to break the walls of the Imperial Palace, so the traitor legions, the traitor forces upon Terra could go into the Imperial Palace and wreck the defenders who were giving their lives dearly to defend the Emperor and the Imperium. If the Lion never gave these big guns to Perturabo, maybe the walls would have never fallen. Maybe DORN could have kept the walls standing and the Imperial forces could have been victorious on Terra without the interference of the Emperor leaving the Golden Throne and having the showdown with Horus. We'll never know, but all we do know is that we know the Lion gave the guns to Perturabo to make the walls come down. And that wasn't the biggest mistake he made. The biggest mistake he made was not following orders. During the Imperium Secundus, Emperor Sanguinius and Guilliman ordered the Lion to guard a planet called Sofa. On that planet, there was discovered an ancient piece of Xenos technology that could transfer anyone or anything anywhere in the galaxy. And as they were researching how to do this, basically the Lion left his guard duty on the planet to go and hunt the Nighthawk. He was consumed by hatred and revenge. Now, when he left the planet, the Night Lord forces attacked the planet, and the Imperial forces who were defending it had to destroy the weapon because they didn't want it to fall into enemy hands. Now, when they destroyed that weapon, because of its ancient technology or whatever was going through it, it was basically like a beacon in the dark. And in the dark, the monster saw the beacon. And it's hinted at that is how the Tyranids came to our galaxy. It took them 10,000 years to get here, but it was literally that beacon being exploded was like the candle, like the match in the dark room that led them to our galaxy. And this was all down to Lionel Johnson not doing his job. So we can technically blame the now Tyranid invasion on the Lion and the Dark Angels. Now, this next Primarch may give me a bit of hate, but I have to do it because it's one of the biggest failures I've personally seen from a Primarch, and that is Sanguinius. Sanguinius knew he was going to his death, but Sanguinius never told anyone. All Sanguinius had to do is talk to his brother, talk to Malkador, talk to Dorn, Jagatai, Vulcan. These were the Primarchs that were all on Terra. Maybe they could have given him some advice. Maybe they could have gone with him, done something to change his mind. But Sanguinius kept all this inside of him. He was consumed by his own fate. And I've always said, you are the master of your fate, not fate itself. And Sanguinius let fate decide his fate instead of letting himself decide his fate, because we all know he went on the Vengeful Spirit and he eventually did have that duel with Horus. Now, we don't know what really is going to go down with that duel because maybe they're going to change it around a little bit, but what we do know during the Siege of Terra story is that he keeps constantly keeping that fate to himself. He keeps throwing himself off walls, charging down Titans because he knows he's going to die upon the Vengeful Spirit. But all he had to do was just talk. Just simply open his mouth and share his concerns with his brother, and maybe that fate could have been avoided. And today we probably could have had Sanguinius still with us, the greatest Primarch of them all, maybe leading the Imperium. But he's not here. He's dead. He's as dead as a dodo in his stasis coffin. Maybe one day GW will bring him back because, again, GW loves money. But for now, he is literally in stasis on Baal. Now, I have to add Rogo Dorn into this because people will call me biased. What do you mean, Valrak? You're not listing Dorn's failures? Yo, you love him too much. No, I admit Dorn made a great failure, and that failure was locking the Librarius away during the Siege of Terra. The greatest weapon the Imperium had against the forces of Chaos was the Librarians, but because of the trial of Nicaea and the judgment that came out of that by the Emperor banning all Psykers, Dorn basically got his Librarius and locked them away on the phalanx so they couldn't take part in the war, in the siege itself. And these could have been the most valuable weapons to fight the Chaos forces because they indeed harbor the warp powers inside of them, and they can destroy the warp with the warp powers, but we never got to see that because Dorn locked them away. These could have been a vital tool on Terra when the warp itself was seeping into the civilian population, into the guard itself, even into Space Marines, ruining them, wrecking them, killing them. If they could have had the Librarians there on Terra defending the walls, it could have been a complete different scenario. The White Scars proved this because the White Scars literally still had the Librarius a part of their legion, and they were using their powers against the forces of the Death Guard when they were constantly fighting them at the Siege of Terra, and this proved to be a big change in fighting the enemy forces. So Dorn, yes, indeed, he made a huge error by not deploying the Librarians. He should have broke the oath to the Emperor, because at the end of the day, breaking that oath could have saved many more lives, and it literally could have achieved a bigger victory, a more successful victory at the Siege of Terror. I'm going to call the video there because it's getting a bit on. I'm going to call the video there because it's getting a bit long, but maybe I can do a part 2 to this. There's so many more things to talk about. There's, you know, there's Korax with his whole making his new legion into like monsters. There's Perturabo with Talon and all his endless disasters. I could probably make a full video about Perturabo and all his stuff. There's Horus literally falling to chaos himself, believing a dream over the Emperor and stuff. So if people want to see that, maybe just say, yeah, I want to see part 2, and I can do another part 2 to this. If you've got any suggestions about Primarchs and their blunders, their biggest failures, anything like that, post it down below, and we can have a nice little discussion down there, as we always do. See you now, have a great day, and bye-bye.